Hello and good evening. So, I want to go through some more chapters in the book of Genesis. I'm not sure how many we'll go through, hoping at least 3. But the next chapters that we're going to come to are, to me, actually very fascinating. And this begins the story of Joseph, which I'm sure a fair amount, if not all of you, are familiar with. You know, the whole coat of many colors we're introduced to here in Genesis 37. But honestly, chapter 38 is such an interesting chapter to me. And I titled this video, Jesus is Judah's Reward. I think that's what I titled it. Yeah. So why would I say that? Why would Jesus be Judah's reward? Well, Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. We know that he comes from the tribe of Judah. Why is that? We're going to actually learn about why that is in chapter 38. But let's begin with chapter 37. So here we catch up to Jacob and his sons, and we're going to be introduced to the hatred that stems from envy that Joseph's brothers had for him because he was the favorite child. Why so? Well, because he was the firstborn of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. So he had a special place in Jacob's heart. Again, my name is mixed up. Anyway, let's get started. So Genesis 37:1. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. The lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So he told on his brothers. Now Israel, Jacob was renamed Israel in chapter 35. So Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He made him a coat of many colors. When his brethren saw their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. So can you imagine this kid who didn't do anything wrong other than his father favoring him, and obviously treated him differently, especially by giving him a coat, which was a physical token of how he preferred him over his brothers. They hated him already. So Joseph has this dream, and he tells his brothers, who already hate him, they're going to hate him more. Why? Because this dream shows them being subservient to him. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. He said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. Behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. So, I was better than you in my dream. His brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Well, this was obviously going to be a foreshadow of what we come to find in the next chapters, starting in chapter 39 of Joseph, because he was going to become a ruler over Egypt and be in a place of leadership, second really only to the I'm not sure what he's going to be called, the prince, the leader, the king, the vizier, whatever he's going to be called. I think Joseph is a vizier, but second only to the actual king of Egypt. And they're going to seek out Egypt in famine, and Joseph is going to provide for his brothers. So they will be subservient to him in that situation. So he has this dream of what's actually going to be fulfilled later in life. They already hate him. They hate him more because of this, but they're not going to hate him later when he's actually in a position to save their lives. Why is he going to be put in a position to save their lives, though? Because they hate him so much. God is going to use the situation to his glory and ultimately to everyone's benefit. So they asked him, his brethren said, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. So this hatred reaches a fever pitch. And what do? Why would Judah be central to this, in so much that he gets his own chapter in chapter 38? Well, we're going to find out. He dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. He told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? So the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars, the 11 were the rest of the brethren. His brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. His brethren went to feed the father's flock in Shechem. So his brothers envied him because of this, but Jacob actually paid attention to it. So then they went on their way, feed their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. He said to him, here I am. He's like, you want me to go to them? Okay, here I am. I'll do whatever you want. He said unto them, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he went out of the vale of Hebron and came to Shechem. A certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? He said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. So they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill him because they hated him so much. And his dreams of them being subservient to him rocked them to their core, to the point where they just wanted to get rid of him, their own flesh and blood. They said unto one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dream. So they're like, yeah, we'll see if what he dreamed actually comes true. If we kill him, then it can't. So originally, they were going to kill him and then toss him in a pit. But what does Reuben, the eldest, say? Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him, but let's still throw him in the pit. Right? Reuben said unto him, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of our hands and deliver him to his father again. So he's like, let's not kill him and then throw him in the pit. Let's just throw him in the pit alive. You know what? Die on his own, and then we can deliver him later to our father. But we didn't actually kill him. We just let him die. That's not what actually happened. Judah comes to his rescue. It came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, because that's what they were going to present to the father as proof that Joseph had died. So they took him and cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. They sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Let's sell him. Let's sell him instead. So Judah actually spared his brother's life by selling him into slavery. He didn't know that's what he was doing, but that's the key understanding that we take away from this, is that the original hatred of his brothers was so great that they wanted to kill him and then hide his body in a pit. But then the oldest came to his rescue, sort of, and said, let's not actually kill him. We'll just throw him in a pit and let him die on his own. That's why it says pit was empty. There was no water in it. So there was nothing life-sustaining there. He was just going to be left to die. But Judah was like, let's not leave him in the pit to die. Let's sell him and make a profit. Let's spare his life. And this is why Judah gets Jesus coming out of his line. Because it was because of Judah that Joseph got spared in order to spare the rest of them. And that's kind of what Jesus did later, right? Came to spare us all. When Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. His brethren were content. They were passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. So barely 1.5 pieces of silver for each of them when they sold their brother. But he didn't die as a result of that. Reuben returned unto the pit. Behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes, because he thought the worst. He returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? They took Joseph's coat and killed the kid of the goats and dipped his coat in blood. They sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. So they didn't actually want his blood on their hands. They wanted to make a profit out of it. But they still took his coat and dipped it in blood and took it back to the dad, took it back to Jacob, to make him think that his son was dead, his favorite son was dead. So it was kind of like, let's get at Joseph for being the favorite and dreaming this dream that shows us as weak. And let's get back at our dad because he favored Joseph. He knew it and said, it is my son's coat, and evil beasts hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, for he said, for I will go down unto the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. It's interesting because any of the children who knew what went on could have at any point eased their father's suffering by just telling him the truth, and they did not. They couldn't have thought very well of their father if they allowed that to happen. Why console someone whose pain you caused? Very disingenuous. So Genesis 38 is a very, very interesting chapter, and here we're going to see Judah. So to kind of set the stage, Judah marries a Canaanite woman who they were actually forbidden from marrying. They weren't supposed to marry of the land of Canaan. He has children out of this union, and he finds a bride for his sons who are of this Canaanite union. When God says don't intermarry with the Canaanites, he means don't intermarry with the Canaanites. And as a result, Judah's sons died. They were not able to bring forth progeny for Judah's line. Judah himself brought forth progeny that would bring forth Christ eventually. When you go to Matthew 1, and it gives the lineage of Christ back to Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat Judah, and his brethren. Judah begat Pharez and Zerah of Tamar, which this is taking us to Genesis 38 right here. And Pharez, one of the twins that Tamar had by Judah, begets the line of Christ, eventually leads to Jesus. So here we're going to learn about Judah and Tamar. Tamar was the woman who Judah selected to marry his oldest child. His oldest child dies, so he gives her to the next one. The next one refuses to get her pregnant, and so he's struck dead by God because he essentially refused to have children with her, therefore essentially trying to stunt the line of Judah. Well, Jesus was meant to come through the line of Judah because Judah spared the life of Joseph, and that's the type and shadow here. So ultimately what winds up happening is Judah's wife dies, and Judah thinks that Tamar, who is actually a widow in waiting for Judah's youngest son to be old enough for her to be married off yet again, because that was the Hebrew custom. And what Jesus talked about in Matthew 22, when he was being tested by the Sadducees who didn't believe in a resurrection, they said, okay, so a woman's married to a guy and the guy dies, and then she's married to his brother dies, she's married to the third brother, and this happens 7 times. Who gets her in the resurrection? So that was what the custom was. The Hebrew custom was that if the eldest died, then the widow would be married to the second oldest, assuming he didn't have a wife. And then if he died, then to the third oldest. So this is what we see happening in Genesis 38, was the oldest died, so she got married off to the second oldest. He refused to have a kid with her, so God struck him dead. So then he was supposed to be married off to Judah's third oldest. While this is in the waiting, Judah didn't fulfill the promise to marry the widow of his sons off to the oldest. So God forced the hand. After Judah's wife died, Judah thought she was a harlot sitting on a street corner and had relations with her, and she got pregnant because he wouldn't marry her off as he was supposed to do. So Judah actually had relations with his son's widow, not being of Canaanite descent, meaning that the line of the lineage of Judah to Jesus was not interrupted by Canaanite women, at least not at this point. So eventually that's how that all works out. Why was Judah specifically chosen, though? Because he is the one who said, no, let's not kill Joseph. Let's spare his life. So this is what happens as a result of that, and how in Matthew 1 we see Judah and Tamar, and then their twins, Perez and another one that starts with a Z that we'll get to. The one that starts with a Z was going to come out first, they tied a scarlet cord around his wrist to identify him as the first, and the hand went back in, and the second one came out first. This was so interesting, and I'm going to read this chapter, so we'll get to this. But this is so interesting because this is the foreshadow of the first shall be last and the last shall be first. This was a foreshadow of the second group being invited to partake of heavenly promises through faith in Christ, even though the first got selected first. The first got marked with the scarlet cord around, the scarlet thread around the wrist, and it went back in. The first to come out was actually the second, who was breech at that time. So this is kind of the foreshadow of what Jesus talked about. The first that was selected comes to him second. The last shall be first, the first shall be last. The kingdom presentation was made to Israel first, and they rejected it. That led to the dispensation of the grace of God, where Gentiles were invited to partake of heavenly promises through faith in Christ. It was the second group invited to partake of Christ through faith. And they, through the rapture of the church, will get to the kingdom first, physically get to the kingdom first. And the second group to whom it was offered, gets there first. The first group to whom it was offered rejected it, will eventually accept it, and they'll get there second. So it's a before the 70th week salvation and the end of the 70th week salvation. But it's the representation of the last shall be first, the first shall be last. And we kind of see that here in Genesis 38. So having said all that, let's get to it. It came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. So daughter of a Canaanite, he took her to wife. They had kiddos. She conceived and bare a son, called his name She conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. She conceived and bare a son and called his name Shelah, and he was at Kezib when she bare him. So there's three kids, Onan, and Shelah. Something. Was Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord slew him. So I was wrong. Tamar wasn't promised to first. He died because he was evil. Judah said to Onan, go into... Oh, no, he was. Sorry. I thought I was wrong. I'm not wrong. Tamar was promised to first, but they didn't have kids because got killed because he was evil. Sorry. I had it right the first time. Judah said unto Onan, go unto thy brother's wife and marry her and raise up seed to thy brother. So the command was to produce progeny, but he refused to do that. Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass that when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. So he was commanded by his dad to be fruitful and multiply, and he refused to do that. God didn't look favorably upon that, because whose line is Christ going to come from? Judah's line. So Judah's got three kids. The first one got struck dead because he was evil. So now we're down to two. The second one refuses to have a child with this woman. So we're running out of options here. God's not happy. This thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. So we got one last chance with Judah's kids. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till my third oldest son be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So it's like, okay, we got a third son. He's not old enough. So go back to your father's house and wait until he reaches age, and then you can marry him. In the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died and was comforted and went up unto his sheep shearers to Timnath, he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. So Judah's wife died. It was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. She put her widow's garments off from her, and covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath, for she saw Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. So Judah had not made good on his promise. He said, go to your father's house and wait till my third oldest son is grown, and then you'll be his wife. That promise was not made good on. So she forced Judah's hand because Judah did not deal rightfully with her. He did not make good on the promise that he made to her. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be an harlot because she covered her face. He turned unto her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee, for he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, what wilt thou give me that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. She said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? He said, what pledge shall I give thee? So what are you going to do? What are you going to give me to prove that you're going to make good on your word of this sheep that you're going to send me? This kid from the flock. Okay. In the meantime, until I send it to you, you can have my bracelets and thy signet, thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. He gave it to her and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. She arose and went away and laid her veil from her and put on the garments of her widowhood. So she went back to normal. Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. So he made good on his promise, but she wasn't there. So he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. He returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. It's like, who was this lady? Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I send this kid, and thou hast not found her. It came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burned. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are am I with child. So Judah's like, bring her here, and let's kill her for being a harlot because she was supposed to marry my kid. So she's like, but the guy who got me pregnant is the guy who gave me these things, which was you. That doesn't look too good, huh? She said, by the man whose these are am I with child. And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet, the bracelets, and staff. And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I. Yep. Because that I gave her not to the third son that I promised I would give her to. And he knew her again no more. It came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand. The midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread and said, this came out first. It came to pass as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. She said, how hast thou broken forth this breach be upon thee? Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zara. So that's an interesting, the first shall be last, the last shall be first. That when you take that into the New Testament, the kingdom was offered first to the Jews and they rejected it. Then it was offered to the Gentiles, they accepted it. And in the scheme of redemption, they will get there first because of their walking by faith and not by sight. And the Jews will get there eventually, but it will be after a period of hardship and only a remnant of them. So seeing Genesis and Revelation is kind of interesting because there's a whole lot of foreshadowing in these chapters. And in chapter 37, we see why Judah was chosen by God, because Judah is the one who decided to and got his brothers to agree to sparing the life of Joseph. So we go to chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. So this is going back to the end of chapter 37. The captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had him down hither. So he's going to Potiphar's house. What happens when he's in Potiphar's house? The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him and did that, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house. So like the house manager, and all that he had put into his hand. But his wife, the Egyptian lady that was Potiphar's wife, not good. It came to pass from that time that he had made him overseer of the house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in his house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. It came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. Joseph, being of upstanding moral character, said, No. He refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in this house, and he hath committed all that he had to my hand. So he put me in charge of this to take care of it, not to take advantage of it. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So he's like, God's blessed me, and he's blessed this household on account of me. And you've been here to reap the blessings of that. And now you're asking me to essentially go against all the blessings by being wicked. It came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. It came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. So she caught him alone. She caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. He's like, No way, I'm out of here. It came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. So she lied. She laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home, and she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto me came in unto me to mock me. It came to pass as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which were spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, his wrath was kindled. Well, naturally, because why would you want some dude to come after your lady? Except the dude didn't come after his lady. But naturally, believing his wife, he would have been upset. Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So he was put in charge first of a household, and then he was put in charge of all the other prisoners. So he was clearly meant to be in charge. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. I think I'm going to stop there for now. And when I'm going to try to finish up Genesis in the next 3 videos, maybe. Chapters 40 through 50. When we meet again, I will resume in chapter 40. I'm not going to do any other books until I finish with Genesis. So thank you for being here and or listening. Hope you guys have a good night.